Okay, so now that we have our plexiglass plates, what we're going to do is we're going to take off our image from that. And I'm going to remove any tape that's on here. At this point, you shouldn't have any plastic left on the plate, right? Make sure that both sides, and there's plastic on both sides, so just make sure you've taken it off of both sides when you're ready for this next part. All right, so it's time for us to do our first proof, and we're gonna need to have our printing press, we need our blankets, and for printing, we're gonna need our cheesecloth. Your piece is a lot smaller than mine, which is actually nice and easier to handle. You may have noticed that there's a really small piece of mat board in your box, and that's actually what we're gonna use to print with. And everybody has a small amount of black ink in their kit. And you should have a popsicle stick for scooping it out with too. So you might have noticed that your printing press has these 4 holes at the bottom, and that's actually to screw it down to a surface so that it's like permanently there, gives you a lot of stability. If you happen to have space in your home and you have extra screws laying around that you could actually do that, go for it, absolutely. One thing, I didn't do it to mine because I don't have a workspace at this desk that I can do that with. You want to make sure that they fit really well though, that the screws fit really well, and you want to make sure that when you're putting them in, you're really being careful not to slide them down too far. I think that if you do, it's likely the type of plastic that we use to print these that it will crack. And we don't have any extras, so take really good care of your mini printing press. The other thing that I want to point out are these little pieces up here. So this is going to help us adjust the height of our plate, and I'm going to show you how to adjust yours in just a minute. Okay, so what we're going to do is adjust our printing bed first so that we don't have ink on our actual plate when we go to get started. And what I'm going to do is first start by putting my, this is called the printing bed. I'm going to put that in place first. So you should have the crank over here. You should have these 2 side pieces, which are held together with these 3 kind of pins. These are removable, so if something's like wonky and not fitting, look around to make sure that you have all of the adjustable parts. And then you have 2 rollers, top roller and a bottom roller. And some of your cranks go in all the way, some of them are sticking out like mine. It doesn't matter. All of them should work just fine. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to take my blankets, and each person should have 2 blankets. And this is to help make sure that the pressure is getting distributed evenly. So it's important that we put those down in place too. Got my printing press. What I'm going to do is just slide this section up. And you'll notice that there are these little bolts down here, and those are adjustable. So if you need a little bit more space, you can do that. All right, so ideally what I want to have happen is what I want to have happen is I want to be able to adjust the pressure of my printing press. So I'm going to put my plate down like so. I'm going to put my blankets down on top like that. If one blanket is smaller than the other, the smaller blanket can go on top so that you create kind of like a little step. That's just going to help your printing press go. What I've been doing with my printing press is I've actually been duct taping it down to my surface, because it is hard to use if it's not kind of permanently in its spot. Okay. And what you can do is just loosen it by rotating these screws. And what you want to do is really get your bed and plate so that they're very center of your printing press. Like so. Okay, so right now it's in the very middle. You can see my plates down there. And now I want to just tighten these. And I'm rotating them clockwise. So I'm just going to keep rotating those until they are snug. So again, it's made out of plastic. It's not like the metal one that we have at school. So if I were to really crank down on those, I would just break it. So you want to have enough pressure so that it's moving through the press. Okay, so I've got my plate. I'm going to take my ink, and I think you all actually have different kinds of ink. We didn't have enough of a single kind of ink that everybody kind of walked away with the same one. So some of you have oil-based inks, some of you have water-based inks, some of you have Caligo, some of you have Speedball. It's kind of all over the place. So I will say that the only people who have ink that's oil-based, that you have kind of a different cleanup method, you have it in the actual container itself. So it should be pretty obvious. If you have just kind of like a scoop of ink, you have Speedball and it will just clean up with water really, really easily. All right, so we don't need our brayers to ink this. In fact, all we need is that little card that I set down somewhere. There it is. Okay, so all you need is your card and you need a popsicle stick. Hold on, I gotta pause this video. Okay, so I've got my popsicle stick, and the other thing that I did, you're gonna take one of those sheets of really thick white paper that was in your bin, and I want you to cut it up and cut it into pieces that are slightly larger than this. So if we've got like a 2 by 3 inch piece of plexiglass, you might go like 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches would be kind of a good length. So I just eyeballed it actually, and now I've got these soaking in a cup of water, just regular tap water. But you want to let your paper soak for a good long while. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a teeny tiny, so small. Notice just how small that is. I'm going to take a teeny tiny, really, really small amount of ink. And I think I only gave you like 1 or 2 popsicle sticks. So try to hold on to them unless you've got extra popsicle sticks at home. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take that card. You're also going to want to hang on to this. You can reuse these over and over and over again. And put it in a place where you can kind of see what I'm doing. What you're going to do is you're going to just drag that ink down. And I want you to change directions that you're dragging the ink. And the next thing you're going to want to do is just kind of scrape away any excess ink. So if you put down just a really, really small amount of ink, you shouldn't have very much that you need to scrape off. All right, so I'm going to take my little card, I'm going to set it to the side. And now I've got this plate that you can kind of see is just like smeared with ink. And I noticed that I got the ink in all of the kind of grooves that I saw. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just wiping down the surface. So I've got some yellow pages, using any kind of like notebook paper, copy paper, anything's fine. So I just flipped it upside down actually. And I'm working on top of a flat surface. I really want to leave my ink in the grooves that I've created. If you can see, right, there's like some smears of ink up at the top. It's starting to kind of come through a little bit though. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cheesecloth. That's this stuff. And if your cheesecloth is really dark and stained, that's okay. That doesn't matter. What you're going to do is you're just going to take that little bit that you have and you're going to ball it up. And I want you to try to make it as like smooth of a surface as you can. And then you're going to go in on top. I'm going to rotate my paper so I've got clean area to work on. You're going to go on top of your plate and you're just going to work in really little circles. I am going so lightly into this. I'm not pushing down hard at all. And it's just kind of whisking the ink off of the surface. Now, as you make multiple prints of these, you're going to start to develop kind of a style. And you might notice that you like if you leave more ink behind. You might like the aesthetic of that look. Or you might like to really make sure that you've wiped your plate totally clean. But this is the time where you're kind of making adjustments. All right, you can wipe off the edges of your plate as well. All right, so now you can see, right, my print is starting to come through a little bit more clearly. All right, let's do our first proof. Okay, so now we're gonna go to our paper that's soaking in water. And I'm gonna take out one of these sheets. I put a bunch in because this paper actually doesn't, like it won't fall apart if you leave it in your water for a long time. So taking out one of my pieces of paper. Now, this, I just grabbed a napkin from the kitchen. Of course, there's no way that you're gonna get ink on this napkin, so it doesn't matter which one you choose, right? You can also use like a paper towel or even just other paper. And I'm blotting it enough that it shouldn't be shiny anymore. So that's pretty bright light that's on this right now. But it shouldn't be shiny. It should feel like cool and damp to the touch. If it's really dry, you should soak it again. You do actually want your paper to be damp because it's going to then really form into the grooves of your plate. So now we have our press. Like I said, I highly recommend duct taping down these 4 corners so this is really stable and isn't going to move at all. For the sake of trying to figure out a way to do this demo so that you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to not do that, but normally that's how I would do this. Okay, so what I just did was I put my press in and then I wheeled it through a little bit so that the blankets have caught. You can kind of see on this side, right? Blankets are through just a little bit, and then I've got this overhang of blankets here. What I can do is I can just peel back these blankets. They don't stay. All right, so I've peeled back the blankets. Now I'm gonna take my plate and I'm gonna slide that down. I'm gonna take my piece of paper, and it's slightly damp. It's a little drier than what I prefer, but okay, putting that through, and I'm gonna hold on to my blankets as I wheel it through. And you should feel some resistance. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tighten this. And just using my fingers to kind of help me guide printing press through. If your press bed falls out, that's okay, not a big deal. And all right, so if you have the right amount of pressure, you should see some slight embossing. And embossing, again, I don't think you can see it, it's too light. It means where you can see the crease that the plate made on the paper itself. And that's a good thing, that's what you want. Okay, so here's my proof. I gotta turn my light. Yeah, there you go. You can vaguely see it. It's really, really light. It's really, really light. So what that tells me is that I need to add more ink, increase my pressure. If your print comes out too light, more pressure, more ink. So here I go. I'm going to do it all again. All right, so this time I actually had enough ink that was just left on my little card that I was able to use that instead of scooping out more ink. So again, you should just be using like 1/8 of a teaspoon at most each time. So I've got my newly inked plate. I'm gonna go ahead and set my damp paper down on top of that. Okay, if your paper is really dry, then your ink's not gonna transfer at all. I noticed that it really helps if I kind of hold the blankets down. Oh, good thing to note too is that there's not a right direction to go. So it doesn't matter which side you feed your press in through. All right, and oh, this is good. Okay, so on this one, I think you can kind of see that there's like a crease around the outer edges. That's really good. That means that I'm getting that embossing. It means that my pressure is really good. That's what I want. All right, so here we go. Again, that's starting to come out. That's starting to look really nice. So now that my pressure looks pretty good and my amount of ink is pretty good, I can go back in and make adjustments as needed. So I can actually take my tool and I can go back in and decide like, oh, maybe I want to add a little bit more of my engraving on that side of the face so it comes through a little bit more. But it does have kind of a soft, hand-drawn quality. It's not going to be the same kind of like really bold, dark shapes that we got with our relief printing. It is going to be a lot lighter, and so think about that when you're trying to come up with your design. I guess I recommend not choosing designs that have like a single line. I think that those are really hard. I recommend choosing something that has shading so you can add some cross-hatching in there. I cannot wait to see what you guys make. I'm so excited. Let's talk about cleanup though.